Hello again, everybody. More of my views from Town. And today I'm going to talk about automobile racing in general. Simply because it was a part of my life and probably, still is in a very limited way. But my mother's family, grew up in Sebring. Well, my mother grew up in Sebring. Her parents were from Georgia, but they migrated to Sebring, Florida, and that's where my mother grew up. And of course, Sebring is known for the 12-hour endurance race of Sebring every year, which is a fairly big thing. And so my father had always been a fan of automobile racing. He particularly liked open wheel racing, Formula One sort of thing. But, any kind of auto racing was, something he enjoyed. He loved it. Now, at the time we were all kids, he was the production manager at the local CBS affiliate here in our town. So he could get press passes and all that sort of stuff and go down to Sebring every year for the races. And we would, be able to go into the town and, because the way it worked back then, the town had a little circle and all the race teams would take buildings all the way around everywhere they could find them in town as their garages, and they would tune up their cars and do all their stuff there. And you would hear them, at night revving their engines up, hauling ass out to the racetrack, which was the old airfield, airport at Sebring. And, you just hear them going in and out of town. Wow! It was very cool because you could just walk downtown at any time you wanted and see all these, famous race car drivers and racing teams from around the world just doing their thing. And that was just really, really cool. So, at the race, my dad would always, have the press stuff so we could be in the infield and we would have access to the pit row and we could go walk through pit row when we wanted to and so forth. And so that was all really, really cool. And we had a little VW camper van, So my buddy Bruce would go with me many times, to the race weekend, and we would just have a ball, out there watching the cars and watching all the guys race, and this was during the, days of, Graham Hill. He was still driving at the time, Sterling Moss, some of the great legends of racing from that day, Phil Hill, I remember very vividly the year the Chaparrals showed up and just kicked everybody's butt. I remember when the GT40s, the Ford GT40s, did the very same thing. I remember those periods, the Ferrari team, the Porsche team. It was just it was a wonderful thing, and it was a different time. There was a guy that would always come out every year and run this old Volvo PV 444. And he and his buddies, they all looked like ZZ Top. They had these long beards and stuff. And they were the only car in the class, so they really didn't care. They would go out and they'd run, 10, 12 laps, bring the car in, sit down, have a barbecue, then go race a few more laps, whatever. They do what the minimum was to get through the race, finish the race, and get the trophy. I mean, you can't do that today, And back then they had the Le Mans start, where all the drivers stood on one side and the cars on the other on the main straightaway at the front. And the gun would go off and the drivers would run over, jump in their cars, start them up and go. I mean, that was just so cool. I mean, that added just an excitement to the whole thing that nobody does anymore. And, that was just awesome. It was truly awesome. And so that, of course, led into the video that I did on quarter midgets. That was part of why quarter midgets was something that my dad really got into for a period with me, was, again, because of his love of racing as it was in general. And my dad would, of course, shoot film while we were down there and make little stories that he could post back to the TV station, that they could talk about the race, blah, blah, blah. So it was always kind of a working venture. And my dad also was, because of the TV station, had an affiliation with some hotshot guy at CBS. So he would always hook up with him at the big hotel down there in Sebring during the weekend, and that would get us, some extra little duty passes and whatever, so we could go other places and stuff. So it was really cool. I remember one year, if I remember correctly, Walter Cronkite came down for the races, and my dad got my brother Kent permission to go on, I believe, the Goodyear blimp with Walter Cronkite. I can't remember precisely if that's exactly. I know he did both. He went on the Goodyear blimp down at Sebring, and he met and had a little conversation period of time with Walter Cronkite. I think they both happened together, but I can't remember precisely. But my brother got to hook up with Walter Cronkite and got to go up on the Goodyear blimp. I didn't go up on blimps because I had motion sickness. I would have thrown up on everybody. So that wasn't going to happen for me. But I remember those days so vividly, and I can remember sitting there watching Mario Andretti when he was driving for Ferrari, coming around the hairpin turn that led into the pit row straightaway. And he was probably doing over 200 when he came down that back straight into that hairpin. And back then, the brakes at night would glow red, because they were getting so hot. And he came in, and he was on the outside. He came in on the outside at the start of the turn of this one guy, took him down, dropped into the inside, went through the second guy, swept back to the outside, cleared the third guy as he headed into the straight. Unbelievable. I was like, man, that is some driving right there, my friend. That was freaking awesome. But, we did that, and of course, that led us a little bit into the 24 hours at Daytona a few times, which was kind of cool. But I have to say, probably there were a couple of highlights from Sebring. And one of them was, of course, getting to meet celebrities in the pit row. Getting to meet James Garner when he was racing. We never really got to meet, but we saw Paul Newman, doing his thing, and Dickie Smothers when they were racing. But there was one a year that was stood out beyond all others. And we got to the track, and the big head honcho who ran the tower, that clocked everybody, was in a dead panic because the crew was late. They weren't there. The people who would count cars, count the laps, know who's in what position, all that sort of stuff. They weren't there. They just didn't show up. And, they were en route, but oh my God, they needed somebody to get the race started. And my mother volunteered herself, myself, and my buddy Bruce. And they accepted, believe it or not. And the three of us went up into the tower, and they started that race. And my mother sat there with her chart, and Bruce and I just yelled out the number of the car as it came across the finish line lap by lap, so she could see who had finished a lap and who was in what place at what point in time, and that information could be transferred to the guys that were putting it up on the leaderboard. And that, I gotta tell you, that, and I think if you talk to Bruce, he would tell you too, that was one of the most exciting 30 minutes of our lives. I mean, that was just awesome. We sat up there. We were the men. We were calling that race, baby. Nobody was going anywhere without us. And that was just a wonderful, wonderful moment. My mother just enjoyed the heck out of it. She laughed. She thought it was just wonderful. And, she just told us we had done a perfect job. We didn't miss a single car. We got them all. Everything went perfect. That was just, a wonderful, wonderful thing. And, I've had a love of road racing. I never really shared my father's passion for Formula One, but regular road racing, I like it. I appreciate it. It's always in the back of your head what a fantasy it would be to drive one of those cars, and do 200 miles an hour plus down a back straightaway, would just be awesome. But never really got that chance. But, there was that time in my lovely Lincoln LS when I would throw the throttle down on that bad boy up on the interstate and hear that engine and give it a nice little growl, and oh yeah, or my dad's Jaguar, and oh, what could have been. So that's my wonderful remembrances of Sebring and spending those weekends with my grandmother and my great aunt and at their home and in the city of Sebring, and just wonderful, wonderful memories and wonderful experiences that I am so glad that we got to have. So I hope other people have had similar, and if you don't, go down to Sebring one year. You might find it a lot of fun. Peace, and remember, hang 10.